I like to start with you, Kajsa. You are in the middle of an election campaign in the Netherlands, and the question to you is, as a country that is not the direct neighbor to Ukraine, how difficult it is to make the position? How much does the population, the voters, follow you when you say we have to go and spend 2% on defense? We have committed and we're going to increase it. How is it when you say, well, we have now to deliver more weapons to Ukraine and we are in for the long haul? Is this something that resonates with the voters, or are you afraid that maybe, well, there will be some criticism on that policy?
Well, we have elections in the Netherlands at the end of November, the 22nd. So I think the campaign still has to heat up. But I think, in general, I would say that the elections are not going to be about support for Ukraine and not going to be about the 2%. Because I think the election is going to be very much on domestic issues. And that is good and that is bad. The good thing is that I think it is accepted very widely now that we will support Ukraine and that we will spend 2%. So also political parties that previously were not in favor of the 2% have changed to this position. So you look at the political middle, a bit to the left, a bit to the right, all of them will say yes, 2%, and that will be the first task for any coalition to make sure that we have that in our budget in the future. And also the support for Ukraine, there's very wide support for that, politically and also in our society. And why is that also bad, in a way? It is because there is not much debate about it. And I think that in every television debate between the party leaders, they will talk about lots of issues and not so much about the war in Ukraine. And that does worry me, because it is not just a Ukrainian problem. It's also our problem. We are responsible, because if our support stops, then Ukraine has to stop fighting. And not necessarily only the Netherlands, but all those countries that support Ukraine. And also all those countries that have to increase their defense spending and that have to strengthen their defense, because that will strengthen NATO. So what I'm going to try also in the campaign is to underline the necessity for the 2%, the importance of having strong defense, and the importance of continuing support to Ukraine, even though it's not going to be high up on the list, I think, in the political discussions.
There are other countries in Europe where this is on the agenda, so I think it's maybe not the ideal situation, but it's not it's the common position, which is good. Kajsa, how optimistic are you that we, as you know, we are all European countries here, how optimistic are you that we can sustain this support as long as it takes? Defining the it, like Gabrielius did it, you know, that Ukraine wins this war, or Ukraine says, okay, this is, you know, what we want to achieve, and this is where we want your support.
Well, there are, of course, reasons to worry. But let me first start by talking about the reasons why we can be optimistic. I think if you look at the beginning of the large-scale invasion, where we were then, and where how we acted as European countries, as allies within NATO, I think we went from 0 to 100 kilometers an hour in seconds. So we really accelerated. And I think we surprised Ukraine. We surely surprised Putin and the Kremlin. And we also surprised ourselves. I think that we are capable of a lot. And we have proven that in the past year and a half. And the only thing we have to do is keep it up. And that means that we have to be united, that we have to be prepared to continue our support in the form of weapons, ammunition, training, etc. And that costs money. But that also means that we have to make sure that the public realizes that it's not only about Ukraine, that it's about much more than Ukraine, that it is about our safety in Europe, that if Putin could win this, then it means it's only could be the first step, and there's going to be a second step and a third step. So it is very much in our interest to support Ukraine because they are fighting this war. We're not fighting it. Then, of course, we look overseas. I just came back from a trip to the United States, and that is worrying. And also, I think we have to address that worry. We cannot pretend that we'll just wait and see how the American elections are going, that there probably will be some solution on that side of the ocean. So I think we have to engage also in the dialogue with our American colleagues and friends, because they have the same interest. In a way, of course, supporting Ukraine is a very cheap way to make sure that Russia, with this regime, is not a threat to the NATO alliance. And it's vital to continue that support. Europe has now surpassed the United States if you look at the numbers. I think we're at 48 billion or something in military aid from European countries to Ukraine. And it's vital that we keep that up. At the same time, if it would decrease on the other side of the ocean, that would also be substantial. We also have the issue of the defense industry. We have difficulties in increasing the production lines of our own defense industry. Same goes for the American defense industry. So there are many, many issues to work on. But I think in the end, if we look at the interest that we have a skin in the game, let's face it. It is a threat to us, and we have to do everything. And we have to accept also we're all democratic countries. We have elections. You win some, you lose some. They're going to be difficult, but we are part of the same family, and in families you can discuss things. And that is, I think, what we need to continue to do, to talk about the threat that this poses to our own security.
Yes, and I think you're absolutely right there. Just the question is, how do we achieve that also in the view of other challenges?
Steve Erlanger, New York Times. Given the title of this session, I just want to ask fairly simply, isn't really the problem an increasing dependence on the United States with this war? I mean, do you see any signs of real European strategic self-sufficiency? I would like to think so. I don't see it. I can't see, I mean, you're right, Foreign Minister, that in monetary terms, if you add everything together, Europe as a whole, EU plus all its member states, have delivered more than the United States. But in military terms, there's no comparison. So I just want to ask you, is this bad for Europe, actually, in the long run, to be back under the armpit of the United States? Thank you.
To whom do you direct this question, Steve?
Anyone who chooses to answer it.
Are there volunteers? Yes.
Well, I would say we're together in NATO, and I think that is what binds us. So for our collective defense, all NATO countries have to be able to rely on NATO. That means that we also have to deliver to NATO. That is the whole reason why Finland is now in, why Sweden wants to join, why Ukraine, of course, also desperately wants to join NATO, because then you can rely on the alliance. But we have to make sure that we do our part, and that's why the 2% is so important. That's why time is also an important factor, especially for those countries who still have some steps to take. And that is why all the planning that's being done on NATO is so important. And I think that in the end, we are all committed to NATO, to the treaty, to the 2% that we agreed upon in Vilnius. And we have to be able to rely upon that, also on NATO as an institution and as a military defensive alliance. So I don't think that any country in Europe necessarily wants to be under an American umbrella, but we have to be able to rely on NATO for collective defense, and we have to be able, as European countries, to do more when it comes to our own security. By being able to, for instance, now the instability in the Balkan, Kosovo. We have NATO involvement, we have EU involvement, we have a UN mandate. It's extremely important that we will be able to deal with these kinds of issues ourselves, because I think our main concern is not direct and on the short term, but it's on a little bit longer term, because there is so much instability elsewhere in the world. And we, of course, it is a real possibility that the United States will have to turn elsewhere also, and thereby not being able to provide us with what we need. So we really have to step up our game, but remain committed to the alliance.